Hey you folks, Cool18 here, and welcome to my report from the Hearts of Iron 4 press event. Sometime last week, Paradox invited a variety of YouTubers and gaming magazine people and that sort of thing to fly out to England to get together for a big multiplayer game of Hearts of Iron 4. Of course, Hearts of Iron 4 is still very much in pre-alpha state. It is not finished. It won't be finished for months. Everything you see here is likely to change about 100 times. So if you hate something, don't worry, it'll probably be gone. If you like something, don't get attached, it'll probably be gone too. In fact, everything might be reskinned as a My Little Pony game. Who knows? So with that disclaimer out of the way, how did it go? We played for about 2 days, and in that time we played about 3 games. And the reason why we played so many games, and you might be surprised about that, is because humans be crazy. So I actually got my hands on a build before the trip, and I was able to sort of practice and learn the buttons and do different things like that. And in that practice, I played as Germany, and I did a very, very careful sort of slow build up, built up my industry, then my military infrastructure, then my army, and then started to sort of pick at my neighbors, but without trying to gain too much attention from the possible allies. And in fact, on my second or third practice run, I was even able to play the diplomacy game so well that I was able to fully annex Poland without the allies ever joining into the war. And so, you can do these things. However, in real life, in multiplayer games, people just love to sort of kind of go nuts. As a result, the World War tended to trigger quite early on in things, resulting in maybe Germany not being fully prepared, maybe resulting in the USA joining a lot faster than Germany might be comfortable with, and so on and so forth, which is why the games tended to be a little bit on the short side. But as a plus side, it allowed us to try a few different countries each. In the very first game, I played as France. It was actually Paradox that assigned everyone to a country. I played as France. I think Aruba was Japan. Northern Lion was Canada. I don't remember who Mathis was. Crap. Terribly sorry. Rob's acting with Germany. Johan from Paradox was USA, which was actually quite good because right from the beginning, myself as France and Johan as USA, we were collaborating and organizing things, knowing that eventually hostilities would break out. And so he basically just beelined all his air bomber tech and did nothing but build I guess B-17s or something. I'm not sure exactly what model, but he just built strategic bombers basically nonstop since the start of the game. And as soon as he could, he joined the Allies. As soon as world tension got up, we're going to talk about the world tension mechanic very soon. As soon as it got up high enough that he could join the Allies, then when war with Germany broke out, he was able to be in the war right from day one. Again, managing these things are very important. Germany was very smart and political, and was like, oh, we only want 1 or 2 provinces. That's all. Or maybe a little bit more, but really, that's all, etc., etc., etc. So, if you don't play that political game, you might get surprised by that. So yes, from day one, USA was able to join in the war, and all he did is move 500 bombers into all these empty air bases I had waiting for him, and within days, all of German infrastructure was reduced to rubble. But of course, all these balance changes are going to be modified, again, 100 different times before this game ever gets released. So your mileage may vary. These tricks will almost certainly not work the same, or not work at all by the time you get your actual hands on it. So yes, so 3 sessions. So first one, I did play as France, and we called that session when the French-American troops marched into Berlin, and the French and UK troops marched into Rome, putting an end really to most of the hostilities of World War II. And by that point, I'm pretty sure that Aruba had taken over most or all of China or something like that, if I recall correctly what games. In the second games, we drew numbers. I was actually I had the last number. I was the last person to pick my country. I ended up picking Poland, and we created, you can actually create your own faction here. It's not just the Allies, the Axis, and the Common Term. You are able to form your own faction if the world tension is high enough. And so Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Finland created the Northern Lights faction, and vowed to stay out of the core hostilities of World War II, but advance their own personal goals, which included annexing Estonia, Latvia, I think Lithuania, and finally at the end of that session, I was fabricating claims on a very beleaguered Soviet Union, actually, with plans to take some of their rich, I think, aluminum and tungsten supplies in the north near Finland, which would have been very nice. And we would have done it too, except in that game, Germany fell even faster than the first time. In fact, I think because people just went pure YOLO mode, I think World War II actually broke out in 1936, which is the year that you start the game in, which is a little bit crazy. So in this third game here, I am playing as Italy, and Arumba is playing as Germany, and we were like committed to managing world tension as much as possible because we wanted to do as much damage as possible. The biggest problem hanging over us was because this was the final day of gameplay and we had to stop at, I think it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and so we didn't know how much we would get done, but we tried to do as much as possible. So with that, let's start to talk about some of the game mechanics. In the background, you guys have been seeing these things. Maybe you've been pausing when the pop-ups come up. For example, the technology trees over here. You can see at the top there are a number of tabs on this tech view. The 4 on the left are ground type things, your infantry, your armor, your artillery type stuff, which includes things like anti-air, etc. And that 4th button is the doctrine button. And then after that, I think it's Navy, then Air, then finally various industrial bits. Industrial technologies tend to make you build industry and stuff faster. Oh, here we go, the fall of Nanjing. And I think soon this will be followed by the puppeting of China by Japan. I think, again, we're going to find ourselves at a pretty high world tension. But yeah, so every country's got a certain number of research slots, and they can research things simultaneously. And a lot of people might have national focus ideas that will eventually allow them to unlock additional tech slots. I think I do that as Italy here. I think Italy starts with 4 tech slots, and I actually unlock a 5th one, which, effectively increases my research rate quite a bit. There's a penalty for researching things that are too far ahead of time, but you don't have any shortage of things to research. The national focus mechanic is interesting because it's almost like another tech tree in a sense, but it represents certain actions that your country can take, and they are meant to be relatively historical. Some countries might have a generic tech tree. In fact, when I played as France, they had just like the day before, again, they're really, Germany claims memo. They are very actively working on a lot of aspects of this, and I think they decided that the French national focus tree was a little too OP. So I only got to play with the generic tree that they'd re-put to France for this event here. But most of the countries should have their own specific national ideas, and certainly Italy did. For example, one of the first things I did in this game is take the idea to bring war to Ethiopia. So I ended up, I think, puppeting them in this game because I could have full annexed them, but again, I was trying to work with Germany to keep the world tension down, and by puppeting them instead of annexing them, we got less world tension going on. So world tension is a meter that goes from 0% to 100%, and because there was a sense of a little bit of isolationism, but also neutrality that was pervading a large part of the world going into World War II. Because World War I was basically a complete lack of neutrality. Everyone was like, yeah, war, yeah, we'll take some stuff, we'll be home by Christmas. And then they sort of learned their lesson that, hey, maybe war is bad. So going into World War II, a lot of countries are like, no, we really want to avoid war at all costs. So while world tension is relatively low, they're limited in their ability to do sort of belligerent type stuff. The Axis, not so much, but certainly the Allies, and to a certain extent the neutrals as well. So for example, allies can't guarantee a country until world tension gets to 25%. And by guaranteeing a country, it actually drops world tension by a certain amount, like 25%. Again, those numbers are what's in the game right now. In fact, some of the developers are like, oh, isn't it 75% to guarantee a country? So clearly all these numbers again are highly in flux, but that's the idea, is doing things like guaranteeing, declaring war, doing anything like that, joining factions tend to be gated by this world tension. But as the world tension rises, people are more and more the countries are more and more able to accept the fact that war is coming and something has to be done about it. They might have to change their economy over to a more military economy. They might have to implement conscription, for example. If I recall my history correctly, and I'm bad about like World War II European history, but I think the UK implemented conscription like in 37 or something like that, like in response to some German actions, but well before the actual war broke out, for example. So that's modeled in this game like that. So by simply puppeting Ethiopia. I was trying to manage that. Let's talk about the economy and the industry a bit, because of course your war machine actually just runs on your industrial machine and your economy. You can't build tanks out of thin air. You need something going on. So there's actually, basically, in a very real sense, there are 4 different screens that affect your entire production line. The very first screen that maybe... Oh, if I'm smart, maybe I'll put up a screenshot of one right around here. We'll see if I can pull that off. The very first screen is a construction screen. Oh, here we go. There's Japan puppeting all of China over here, and that'll bring the world tension up to 100%, which then prompts me in Germany to be like, okay, well, I guess we don't have to keep the kid gloves on. And I think very soon after that, I declare war on Yugoslavia, for example. Very first screen is a construction screen. So the map is divided into sort of like little provinces and subregions and different things like that. And what you can do in these areas is you can build a variety of different buildings, and they don't preclude one another. So one area can be maxed on civilian factories and maxed on military factories and maxed on anti-air and fortifications and naval fortifications, etc., etc., etc. So one of the first things I tend to do is when we start the game is I just try to build a crap ton of civilian factories, because civilian factories are actually what you use to build every other provincial improvement. They just produce sort of the kind of the raw goods, the basic materials that you will then use to build every other building. They're also used in trade. So one of the things to note in this game is there is no money. You don't have a budget. You don't have dollars. There's no ducats to trade back and forth, anything like that. Instead, the closest thing you have to currency are your civilian factories themselves. If you need some resources to build troops, for example, steel, tungsten, oil, etc., 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 you can purchase them in the trade interface by effectively sort of trading away one of your civilian factories. What you're doing is you're trading away sort of some goods, some, you know, generic sort of goods that come out of these civilian factories in exchange for these raw goods. So what you do basically a civilian factory, you can get 4 units of some sort of raw good, like oil or tungsten, or I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but something like that. So building up a lot of civilian factories is very important to be able to trade for that later on. Plus, the more civilian factories you have, the faster civilian factories themselves build, and then later on, the faster your military factories build, and so on and so forth. So that's 2 of the 4 screens, is the trade screen and the construction screen. The third screen that's involved in your whole sort of production pipeline is the screen where you actually produce the weapons and equipment that will be used for your army. So your basic infantry weapons, your actual individual tanks, your individual planes, your individual boats get produced on one screen. But that doesn't actually produce a unit for you. Oh, there you go. Czechoslovakia joining in on the side of Yugoslavia as I declare war here, and then I call in my allies. You're basically literally just sort of building a gun and a backpack and boots, or whatever goes into infantry equipment, and then putting it into a warehouse. And it's when you get to your 4th screen, which is the army builder or army planner screen, where you actually say, okay, I want 5 infantry divisions to be produced simultaneously, and they will use any equipment that you have stockpiled to equip themselves, and then they will go through basic training. Now, what's interesting, and actually I did it just a minute or 2 ago in this video, is you can actually deploy your infantry or any type of divisions early. Anytime you want, you can instantly put them out, even before they're equipped. Obviously, that's suicidal, they're just going to die. But one of the things that a lot of players would do, because you could just, like, you could go and have, like, maybe 20 lines of infantry being produced simultaneously. But the other thing you can do is just say have 5 lines of infantry being produced. They get equipped relatively quickly, and then you can instantly deploy them and then put them into their own command group set to train. So they will sit there and they will still train, they will still gain experience. Effectively, they sort of skipped basic training, but then they're doing sort of like field training. And the difference between the two is when you train in the field, all your units are taking attrition. They take about 1% attrition, so you have to replace a little bit of manpower and a little bit of equipment. But in addition to getting experience points for their own division, the same as if you just left them in the queue and they were going through basic training, they also generate a certain amount of countrywide or nationwide experience. You've got ground, sea, and air experience points, which you can see at the top of the screen with the stars, the gold star, blue star. I think it's a gray star. Can't quite see it. Silver, I guess. And those stars can be used to tweak and customize your divisions to add more infantry battalions. Or maybe you're going to decide, hey, how about we have some towed artillery added to these groups? Maybe when you design your tank division, you want to make sure to include some mobilized infantry. And you can really tune the construction of your divisions, which is really cool. So in Army Builder, you go and you design your divisions. And then when you put them in a queue, you might get a reminder of, hey, you just added some anti-air equipment to your infantry divisions, but did you know you're not actually building any? And you're like, oh, right, so I'll have to go into the production queue and start building those. And before the hostilities really break out, you actually probably want a big stockpile of that equipment, because once the shooting starts, you're going to have to replace your equipment relatively quickly because there's going to be a lot of attrition and different things like that happening. So as Germany, you might want like 10,000 units of infantry equipment just sitting in the bank, ready to go. Plus, once the shooting starts, your industry is probably going to get bombarded, which is going to slow your future production as well. So that's a pretty good idea. Yeah, so let's talk about maybe the warfare itself. So when you've got your troops together in a command group, you can assign them a commander as well. Depending on the rank of the commander, they do have a maximum number of troops they can reliably command. Oh, here you go. You can see me deploying some troops before their training is done, for example, right there, just because things are happening a little faster than expected. So I'm like, all right, boys, you're going to get some experience real fast. Oh, also, I pulled all my troops off the French border. That's right, to just try to get through this Yugoslavian war a little faster. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, command groups. So the rank of your commander determines how many troops they can reliably command. Now, if you go over that limit, it doesn't mean your troops all of a sudden turn to crap, but it means that whatever benefits you might have had from having a commander, you're losing. Each commander has a level, not just a rank, but a level which adds some combat strength, and they have different traits like 10% bonus to offense, for example, or 5% better armor units, etc., etc. So as long as you stay within their limit, that's good. You can promote your commanders to a higher rank, and then they can have more people, but it does lower their level by 1. I don't think it affects their actual special talents, but it does lower their level. So you can, do a few different bits. Different things there. Hungary just joined the war. I think Hungary is played by a player. I can't remember who, but I'm pretty sure that's what was going on there. And then once you're in a command group, you can give them orders. And this I like quite a bit. I really like the order system in Hearts of Iron 4. It's I'm sure still going to get tinkered on. It's a little different from the way the order system worked when I saw it at PDXCon, for example. But it is still a pretty similar sort of thing. The idea is you can take your troops, assign them to a front, in which case they'll move up to a border, and that's sort of a defensive line on a front. But then you can also assign offensive lines after you've done that. And you can see here, for example, there's an offensive line going through Graz there. And you can put as many offensive lines as you want, and they'll make a series of moves in sequence. And what's cool, actually, if you hover over the offensive line, the terrain will go like province by province. They'll sort of highlight green to demonstrate the path that your soldiers will be taking through this territory. And what's interesting is as soon as you put together one of these plans, and I say offensive plans, but you can also have the lines behind you as the idea that you may have to fall back to another position. So you've got your troops initially on your border, but you know that, when Germany comes rolling through or whatever, you're going to have to fall back. So you draw a second line right behind a river, a few provinces behind you. So when you lose the front where all maybe your fortifications were, you start to get pushed back, then you give the order for all your troops to move back to the secondary line behind a river, which gives a huge defensive bonus. Very, very good kind of position. The other advantage is when you have a plan, if you have any sort of plan like this put in place, your units will slowly build up a planning bonus to their combat. And even if you haven't executed the plan, as long as you've got one and they've had the time to become organized around that, they will get a pretty substantial boost to their combat ability. So you kind of always want a plan assigned to your troops. Now, as is, they even get this command this planning bonus if A, you haven't executed the plan, and B, they're being attacked, so on the defensive. It wouldn't surprise me if that changed by release, just because sort of thinking about it logically, it doesn't exactly make sense as to why that might be. But I do like it. It really, the game encourages you to not just, unlike something like Crusader Kings or EU4, for example, where you're manually moving troops around quite often in response to things that happen, and you're just fiddling with them quite frequently. Here it's like, listen, you're trying to manage tens of thousands of people, you've got a big army structure. Wouldn't it make so much more sense if you were just sort of, you were giving orders and giving a chance to your generals and commanders and lieutenants and all the way down the rank to actually, work around that and organize their divisions and their battalions and so on and so forth. And I think that's a really, really good idea, a really strong sort of idea. So we've got that in there. Diplomacy, there's some interesting things you can do there. Yes, you can fabricate claims. For a lot of people, your national focus will simply give you some claims and things automatically, but not all the time. So you do that. You can do some sort of spy-ish kind of things in that you can send some agents to another country to influence their population, say more towards fascist or more towards democracy, that sort of thing. You can pull a coup. We didn't do any of those when we played last week because they disabled that button because they were making some changes to it, and they just didn't want us to play with a button that was probably only half programmed. The core, again, this is not a review. This is a pre-alpha build. I certainly, can't give any sort of fixed review. It would be a silly thing to even attempt. Oh, here you can see a bunch of my stuff has been bombed here. It's glowing in red. It's going to get auto-repaired. But I will say this. People really enjoyed themselves. When it came time, it was late in the day. All right, we're having dinner at 8. It's now 6 o'clock, and in the schedule, we'd had a couple of hours in there for you guys to take a break, to refresh yourselves, to maybe chat amongst each other. Everyone's like, no, we'll just keep playing right until 8 o'clock. Right until we're supposed to, our dinner reservation is, we will just go all the way to the end. People were really into the game and having a lot of fun with it. Maybe too much fun, which is why the world tension was reliably hitting 100%, by the end of 1937, for example, here, and the wars tended to break out. Although, interestingly enough, here, you can see that even though the world tension's at 100%, it doesn't mean that France, UK, USA, etc., was able to just jump on Germany and Italy here, because they didn't have guarantees on Yugoslavia or different things. So there was a limit to, they couldn't instantly declare war, but now they are free to completely mobilize their economy for war, their industry for war. They can put in their conscription, and now they can start guaranteeing stuff and be like, okay, we're drawing a line in the sand. Unfortunately for Yugoslavia, that line in the sand is well behind them, which, bad for them. Good for me in this game, because while it is going a little bit slow, quite a few people did jump in here, which did delay our conquest of Yugoslavia. We had to, sort of fight on a few more fronts than we may have expected. But Germany is in on this with me, which is good, and of course Hungary from the other side. Actually, that's the other thing. Hungary, you can see, is just being melted away here. Which did prove a useful distraction at this point. I was quite happy. I was like, okay, you listen, Hungary, I'm sorry. We're going to come for you. Don't worry about it. We'll go and get there. Right now, the peace mechanics. So unlike games like EU4, for example, is in this time and in the way these wars were fought, there was a lot less of this sort of early or partial peace treaty process. I can't just I'll get 25% war score and then just ask you for a couple of provinces. This was really, kind of total war is what's going on here. So what you have to do is you have to invade the country until it just breaks, until it surrenders, more or less totally. There are different areas on the map worth more or less victory points. Everywhere where you see a star, I think those are worth 25 victory points, and a little square might be worth 1 or 2, and some of the provinces might be worth some. So altogether, your enemy will have a certain number of total victory points that they own, and then they have a national unity. You can see in the top left corner here, Italy has a 90% national unity. So if someone were to attack me, they would have to own 90% of my victory points before Italy surrendered. Some have much lower national unity. For example, France starts off in the build I was playing with about 40% national unity and got quite a few event pop-ups that had, one of the options was to take a further national unity hit, which means that France would surrender extraordinarily quickly. You basically just have to, run into Paris itself, and then the entire country will collapse. Whereas for others, you really have to occupy very nearly 100% of their land before they're willing to surrender completely. But then when they surrender, then you can pretty much dictate whatever terms you want. For every country that was in the war, they'll get a different sort of war contribution score, and they can ask for more or less. If you're basically just soloed a whole country, then you'll have no problems annexing them, for example. But if it was really, you know, a big, let's say a big major effort between a bunch of allies and Comintern and things like that, then you may have to partition a country into itty-bitty bits, with no one owning the entire thing. But I'm sure that wouldn't lead to any further tension down the line. Here you can see the current Italian national focus ideas, which are kind of interesting. You can go historical or you can go anti-historical. Lots of ways. There we go. Finish a little bit of research. So I could just take the claimed states. I claimed Dalmatia and Slovenia. From, I believe, a national focus gave me those two claims. I'm not sure, I might have fabricated, I'm not 100% confident. But I think in the end I will decide to simply annex Yugoslavia at this point, because hey, why not? It's not like we can raise the world tension any more than that. So we will go ahead and do that. Yugoslavia was annexed. Italy has grown bigger. This whole time I haven't had my troops on the western border, so that's like the priority. To just run them over there as quickly as possible. In fact, I felt like, yeah, I think at this point, France had actually declared, or the Allies had declared war on us, but the French player had not yet moved his troops into Italian territory. So thank goodness for that. Otherwise, well, I might have had to switch sides or something like that. I'm sure there was a lot more in here that I want to cover. But I don't know, we got the basics of the fields. And again, going into too many specifics would sort of be a little bit crazy. The air game is interesting. The naval game, I think is going to get some changes. I know there were some talks about maybe changing the way that, what was it? Oh, naval troop transports might work, which was interesting. I had dabbled with a little bit of naval invasion, especially when I was playing as Finland. I did a naval invasion of Estonia, and it was kind of fun, but there was, you know, it took like 4 or 5 clicks to sort of do it. So I think they're looking at ways to sort of trim that down. The game still feels like it has a tremendous amount of depth. It's just that it feels like what they're trying to do as much as possible is end up with a user interface that doesn't make you feel like the game is fighting you. And I think this will by far be the most accessible version of Hearts of Iron 4 to date, without really losing too much of its complexity. Like in a very real way, EU4 is much, much, much more accessible than EU3 or any previous versions of Europa Universalis, for example. And yet to say that it lacks complexity, I think is a big mistake, because I think if anything else, especially, you know, as we've gotten more expansions, the game continues to become more and more and more complex, but without losing that accessibility. Hearts of Iron 4 will still certainly be quite a bit harder to play than EU4, for example. There's just an inherent level of complexity here that I think is in great part due to the time scale. Because you're not going through 400 years of history, but rather, you know, a decade, then you have to be a lot more nitty-gritty in little things. But unfortunately, this brought me to the end of my day. At this point, my cab was waiting to bring me to the airport, so I unfortunately had to depart. I never got to see how the German-Italian axis, run by myself and a Roomba, fared, which made me kind of sad. See you next time, folks. Bye-bye.